In previous videos, I've talked about the idea that psychedelics are inducers of meditative states, and that the psychedelic experience per se is more a natural, attainable state, a naturally attainable state that psychedelics sort of put you into, rather than being something that you can only achieve through psychedelics. And recently, as I've been meditating more, I've noticed something that could tie into this idea. And it's that when meditating, mm, at least in, I mean, I don't know much about different schools of meditation, but from my experience, what tends to happen is simply that I will try to be aware of whatever is in my experience, in my experience field at the moment. So if I'm feeling something, no matter what it is, to allow that to be felt. And if I'm feeling nothing, to allow that lack of feeling to be sort of to be. And the way that works, at least for me physically, is that certain areas of my body will acquire sort of tension, and then it gets released. I think in books about meditation, they often talk about the body scan technique, where you will sort of focus on your toes, focus on your legs, blah, 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 and release the stress through those zones. Or other techniques where whatever part of your body is the most tense, that's where you allow to sort of concentrate, not concentrate, but more like deconcentrate, like you concentrate your focus, but you allow it to relax. It seems to me that this is almost something, it's a technique, but at the same time it's something that kind of naturally happens with meditation, with just sort of being in the moment. And it seems to happen in phases, in specific places. So maybe your arms will feel really tense, your shoulders will feel really tense, and maybe other parts of your body also feel tense, but maybe your shoulders are like the one that's most sort of calling to your attention. So your attention will focus on them, and by focusing on them, they will relax. And then something else, of course, will gain center stage as the most tense place, and then you will sort of go to that, and then you go to that, and you go to that. It's like your awareness naturally goes to those places. You just have to sort of allow it to go to those places. You will kind of naturally concentrate on whatever is hurting, in a sense. Um, and by doing that, it's almost like a sort of little medical program where you're sort of going, okay, I'm going here, 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 and slowly relaxing things. Alan Watts used to call the ego simply the feeling of stress on the skin and on the muscles. And that if that feeling of tension and stress on the muscles were to completely relax, it wouldn't just be a physical alleviation, but it would have all sorts of psychological and emotional effects, because we base so much of our identity on the muscular stress that we consider to be normal as part of our culture. Wilhelm Reich also talked about this, how kind of emotions and trauma get stored in very specific muscles. It's not that the emotions get stored in the muscles, but like if you, I don't know, I'm kind of making this up, but if you, I always use the overeating example. I'll use that again. If you overeat, maybe your stomach is very associated to your anxiety. If you overeat with the intention of alleviating certain fear of social situations, uh, that fear of social situations will be very related to whatever like negative feelings of stress on the stomach are created by overeating. And they just get buried. They get buried at a really unconscious level. If suddenly you start relaxing yourself to levels of relaxation you don't usually feel, a lot of that anxiety that you were storing by overeating is going to necessarily come out as part of yeah, just as the muscle memory, I guess. Where I'm trying to go with all of this, though, is that meditation, or this sort of this process of relaxing muscles, is ego death in itself. It is ego death, but it is also the emergence. So something dies and something emerges that was hidden. And a lot of what emerges is what I would call the psychedelic experience. Not necessarily in like the visual sense only, but more like how Terence McKenna talked about it, like this things being psychedelic simply in the sense that the mind kind of manifests. That seems to happen through relaxation. And relaxation seems to happen through this sort of natural focusing of awareness on specific areas of the body. Okay. I'm sorry, that was like a really long introduction, but I needed to set all of that up because what happens is often, at least to me, something that has always happened to me, is that I will have an annoyance in my body, some sort of pain or an inconvenience, a discomfort, and I won't focus on it. Sometimes consciously, sometimes just on pure sort of autopilot mode, where it's almost like in order to feel better, I try to drive my awareness away from what is hurting, try to distract myself from what is hurting or what is tense. Again, classic example, by overeating, by going and, I don't know, meeting up with friends, trying to forget about it or whatever. So you kind of, yeah, you will often do this so much because I think our culture kind of tells us that bad things and pain are not to be walked through, right? Like I I would say my meditation practice has taught me that in cases of pain, the way out is through. You need to really like walk through it in a sense. But culture says the opposite. It says, you know, you should do this, you should go to another place, have a vacation, buy this. And it gets kind of drilled into you. So that if you ever were to do something similar to meditation in whatever form, playing music or whatever, you might have this kind of discomfort in that's sort of calling you, it's calling for your attention, but you are so convinced that you should not go there. You're so convinced that in order to solve this discomfort, you should definitely not go there, that you should go in the opposite direction, focus on something else. We're so convinced that that is the method that the psychedelic experience never emerges naturally, because we never descend into this self-reflection. And again, this self-reflection seems to follow a path in very physical terms. First, you go there. Then once this is relaxed, you go here. Then you go here. Whatever. It just follows its own path, and it kind of unwinds at its own rate. And as it unwinds, you get deeper and deeper and deeper into this sort of expression of whatever is unconscious. I'm really bad at getting to the point. So, when you have vivid visuals in front of you, what they will often do is that, like a dream, they will be a representation of fears and desires and just unconscious mind. And in a meditative state, what that tends to represent, as I've said in other videos, is that the visuals themselves will point towards the areas of the body that are the most tense. Or, psychologically, they will point towards the areas of your emotional, psychological life that are most deserving of your attention and which you are trying not to deal with. It's the classic case of alcoholics who were, during the 60s, when LSD research was finding that it was helping alcoholics recover, precisely because it simply allowed all this unconscious stuff to gush forth that presented to them in the form of visuals very clearly that they were not enjoying what they were doing, that it sort of viscerally made them feel it. The same seems to happen at the physical, at the body level, where the visuals will sort of point, there will be like a red pointing dot in an area which is painful. And maybe you had unconsciously sort of tried to forget about this pain, or you'd sort of convince yourself that it was normal, or that you shouldn't focus on it. But as the visuals sort of claim your attention, we are such visual animals that you can't avoid going to the center of where the visual is telling you to focus. Whenever we have a screen in front of us, we immediately just sort of stare at it. It's the same thing. Sort of when you have something visual in front of you, you look at it. It catches your attention. It's bright colors, and that way, it's almost like you trick yourself, you lead yourself, your unconscious, to focusing on whatever it is that desires your focus in your body. And then this process I was talking of before is engaged, where suddenly, once this part is relaxed, you will go to the next, to the next, to the next, and as you follow this little train, you go deeper and deeper into whatever, into expressing the repression. So that happens with meditation. The visual thing happens with meditation at a slightly, and it depends. I mean, it doesn't happen that much to me, but it can happen. And when it does, it becomes an incredible aid. It becomes so useful, because suddenly, in the middle of the meditation, you notice how, if however weak the visuals are, if some kind of visual cue is signaling that your ears are sort of clamoring for your attention and are stressed out, and you hadn't been focusing there, maybe you'd been focusing on your breathing because you thought that theoretically that was what you should do because you'd read about it or whatever, but actually your ears were deserving your attention, then the visual is going to really push you there by maybe showing you a picture of an ear or any sort of dreamlike visual cue. And suddenly that really plummets you down, in a positive sense, down into yourself. So if during meditation that is so weak, so to speak, I would claim that that's precisely why a psychedelic experience, by having the visuals as the central element, puts you completely on the rails. It's almost like there is no way to avoid meditating. There is no way to avoid entering a meditative state to such a degree that it it brings forth what we usually call this experience. So it seems as if what it provides maybe is not so much the experience itself, but the aid for you to focus your attention in the present moment, which then, out of its natural sort of maybe sort of this state of focusing your attention is precisely what activates your brain in certain ways or deactivates certain areas. But it's almost as if it's the visuals that allow you to become aware of whatever needs becoming aware of.